Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Podcast powered by First National. I'm Aaron Cameron, for me, of course, Adam Płatek. Recording here live at the Land and Development Conference as part of the speaker video series sponsored by Fuller Landau. Our guest today is a woman by the name of Meggen Janes, who's the Executive Director at Canadian Brownfields Network and the Principal at Geosyntec. Meggen, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me here.
So this is interesting. We were just reminiscing, Adam and I reminiscing, reflecting with Meggen about how we've done well over 300 episodes, and I had made the comment we've basically covered every topic, and then Adam pointed out we had not covered this topic. So today we're going to be talking about environmental contamination, brownfields, your brownfield network, and so I think something that we've never really covered in depth, but I think something that's becoming increasingly important in the Canadian real estate context, whether it be obviously contamination in the soil, but climate impact, greenhouse gas impact, etc. Like obviously that's coming fast and furious at all of us in the community. Before we get there, Meggen, why don't we just start with your background and where you've worked and where you work now?
Sure. So I've been in the industry for about 30 years. I'm an environmental consultant, worked for many companies. I also was the Director of Soil and Groundwater for Waterfront Toronto for 4 years, just left there in 2021, but instrumental in getting some of the environmental permitting for the Toronto Portlands project, the river building project, and many of the environmental approvals for managing this contaminated soil and
very contaminated.
Very contaminated, and looking at soil treatment options and reuse options there to enhance the project. From there, I moved into consulting again at Geosyntec, and in September took on the executive director position at the Canadian Brownfields Network.
So what is the Canadian Brownfields Network?
It's a not-for-profit national organization that is promoting brownfields as a first choice for redevelopment.
Oh, that's interesting. How does that work?
Okay. So it is national. So we draw in volunteers from across the country. We have a lot of initiatives where we're focusing on streamlining the brownfield approvals and working with our regulators, working with our municipalities to try to align some of their processes. Also looking at training and sharing knowledge. We have a series of webinars. We do advocacy work and dive into some of the details on housing affordability and look at also what are the barriers to brownfields. Why are those choosing greenfields over brownfields? How can we make it an even level playing field? So it's an exciting place to be right now, because as you may have only delved into brownfields in 30 times, I think, in your 300 podcasts, but over the last year, brownfields really have been quite prominent in media and quite a strong focus and attention on brownfields and what can we do about these spaces.
Well, you mentioned affordability, and of course, urban centers having the most pronounced affordability issues also probably have the highest ratio of brownfield opportunities versus greenfield available.
Well, greenfield zero, brownfield infinity, yeah. Isn't that the score?
That would be the ratio, yeah. Well, maybe to start off, let's kind of define what brownfield sites are. I'm sure that everybody has at least some passing concept of it, but maybe we'll nail it down to something more concrete.
Yeah, and every municipality does define it a little bit differently, so I like to look at the US EPA's definition. And the key part is that it may or may not be contaminated. We often think of brownfields as contaminated land, but that's not the case. It's really underutilized land that can be lifted for a higher, better use, but it may or may not be contaminated. So we can have things like a commercial facility that is actually underutilized, low vacancy rates. It's a brownfield. So it could be then uplifted, and we talked today about commercial converting it to residential. So that in effect is a brownfield site. The more traditional brownfield sites, industrial properties, industrial renewal to higher enhanced industrial is also a brownfield site, or industrial converted to residential or commercial or community, also brownfield. We also have some of our colleagues within the CBN space working on orphaned oil well sites in Alberta and converting those to renewable energy. So again, Brightfield is another term we use, but it's a brownfield site that's being converted to renewable energy.
So why Brightfield? Why that as opposed to brown? What's the bright meant to denote?
It's just the renewable energy aspect.
Oh,
so Brightfield
okay.
is a brownfield
Okay.
with lights.
Oh, okay.
So that would be wind turbines,
Yes.
solar panel fields,
That's
something
right.
like that.
That's right.
Noble work for sure. If we were looking at an urban center, would anything that's had previous development fall in the category of brownfield?
I think there's some that maybe would still be that traditional infill. So if you think of some old housing stock that is just being converted into residential, that's probably more of the infill side, not a true brownfield. It doesn't need to have an environmental permit to change its land use, and often it's an easier process to move through for redevelopment.
Aaron joked about infinity to zero being the ratio, but what would be the actual, if you're looking at 100 developments in a city, how many would fall into the brownfield category in a major urban center across Canada?
Yeah, I wouldn't know that.
No?
At all.
Okay, no, fair enough.
No. I think people say that there's about 30,000 brownfield sites across Canada, and I don't think that's actually a true number. I think it's probably more than that.
It's a guesstimation.
And unfortunately in our system we don't actually catalog our brownfield sites. There's some provinces that are starting to do that, and you can go to Manitoba and you can find all their contaminated sites all plotted on a nice GIS map, but not every province is doing that. We still have some work to do to identify what are brownfields so that we can really focus some more attention on them.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the biggest challenge is the uncertainty of whether you'll get of what contamination is in there, the cost to remediate, if you can actually remediate. If you can't, then the record of site condition process and how the ministry is going to review it. Like, obviously, from a developer's perspective, uncertainty is a negative thing. It can be more time, more money, longer, if at all, getting approvals done. So how does your network, what are the things, what are you guys lobbying against? What's the education platform? How do you kind of convert or battle that notion?
Yeah, so those barriers to brownfields, really that uncertainty in how the brownfield environmental approval process fits in with the development process. That is one of the things that we're really focusing on. How can we streamline that? Are there better ways? Are there ways that we can align what the municipalities want and what the province wants, so that they're connected in with the development timeline as well? Because there's disconnects between when a municipality wants something on the environmental side of things and when the province wants something. So we're trying to align those a little bit better. We're trying to work on streamlining. We're trying to open up the options so that there's faster ways to get to that end goal of getting that environmental permit.
Wouldn't the solution be, now hear me telling
Aaron's
you
going to solve it for you right now.
Yeah. I'm still going to do it anyway.
Okay,
so you got a site. I use Toronto, but you can use Vancouver, any major urban center where you could imagine the highest and best use is some large, tall, residential, new housing. You talked about affordability, just more supply. Let's build it. But a gas station, I don't know, some old industrial use that for sure has presumably caused some sort of contamination. Wouldn't you just, before it's even been sold, if maybe it's owned by the city, let's call it, just go in, do the environmental testing, dig the boreholes, figure out what the contamination is, figure out what the process is, and just get it remediated or at that point, so that any buyer of that site for development you've eliminated the uncertainty.
Yeah, and there's certainly some developers that do that. When I was at Waterfront Toronto as the director there, that was one of the processes. Waterfront Toronto would undertake to get that environmental permit, that record of site condition, so that those sites were ready for development. So there is a bit of a mix. I think Creatio, a landowner for the City of Toronto, they also work in some cases that way. They will, for a site, if it's with a not-for-profit, they will then undertake to get the record of site condition. But there's also some other models where those sites are then sold as is, and so it's the next owner that is needing to achieve.
Don't you lose some value because you've got that uncertainty? Here, buy this, but you're going to buy it buyer beware, and so that buyer is going to pay less for it. Wouldn't you want to? Particularly, I don't see developers doing this. I see really more so government institutions or non-profit organizations that are looking to get the developer to buy the land, spend the time and the energy. I guess it's the money too, perhaps, that's the issue, but you're eliminating the uncertainty, more likely to get full market value for that land.
Yeah, I think certainly that there are some developers here who specialize in brownfield sites, and they get a discount on the brownfield sites.
Because they see the value, because they've got the expertise,
and they can stomach the risk.
They can stomach the risk, yeah.
That's right, and they know the process, and they've worked with the municipalities, and they understand what incentive plans are available through the municipalities, and they have more. They can draw that certainty in because they've done it before.
I mean, not that I'm an expert in this by any means, but I know when we speak to clients about this kind of stuff, the recommendation is you need some shock absorbers in your bank account in case it does run longer, deeper, more expensive, more pronounced.
Well, I mean, the big problem, and that's just, I mean, for those that maybe aren't terribly familiar with it, fortunately, Adam and I have read lots of these sort of site inspections, site assessments, sorry. You know, it's in the groundwater, it's migrated off-site, and now you're pooched, right? Now you're talking potentially just, you know, you're no longer, that site is worthless, right? And that's the challenge. So are you advocating for at least the government entities that own this land or whoever is participating to get ahead of that? Because that's why that uncertainty, like one thing, it can cost you time and money. Maybe it delays your project by 6 or 12 months. Maybe it costs you extra $1 million, but it could also completely, you know, terminate the opportunity to build on that site in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things we've heard from our members is that mitigating offsite liability is one of the barriers to brownfield redevelopment, and we are putting together a webinar in June to actually focus on how do you mitigate offsite liability. So we're bringing in insurers and financial institutions and lawyers to actually dive into that to come up with some solutions.
Well, I can tell you what our answer is. we're not financing.
I know, and right, that's right. And so many are, you know, stay away. But we also talk to the regulators, and they have tools as well for managing offsite liability. So there are ways, and I think we need to share that knowledge so that others are more comfortable and accept some of that offsite liability.
Because I mean, just to kind of add on to Aaron's point, the lender can be the negative recipient of liability in that circumstance. It's not just us being overly cautious. It's the liability does get spread around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, just really quickly, because I think it's important for the context, the conversation. When we take a mortgage, right? You think we don't give mortgages, we take mortgages from our owner, the developers or operators. We effectively are taking an interest in that property, meaning, you know, we think we kind of quote unquote own it at that time. And so we're not taking any risk, right, for environmental risk. The developers can take that risk. They're earning, you know, a really big high upside. The financing companies, like we own, you know, 10, 15 basis points, like literally almost nothing on the hundreds of millions of dollars that go out. So
well, and the liability can extend beyond the term of our mortgage too. You know, we discharge, and the lender can still have people
particularly if it's major contamination, and we have seen it. And there's lots. I'm sure you're familiar with many stories where it's occurred, right, where that contamination has gotten into the site, and it's not that owner, it's the previous owner or the previous owner that caused the contamination, but it doesn't matter. You're now on the hook, right? So as soon as I take that mortgage, we're on the hook too for any downstream. We had one where it was, you know, 4, 5, 6 properties downstream, and it was all apartments, and it was really, really, really messy, and that's a major risk. I don't know how you battle that. What are your comments to that?
Well, so offsite, in the same way that you can look at site-specific evaluation of your property, you also look at off-site in the same way. So you evaluate whether it's a risk to human health or ecological receptors. So you see what's off-site, you do your studies, and then you determine whether it's a risk. And if it's a risk, then there's all these mitigation measures that you can apply. So there's all these tools that are available, and you know, they're tried and true. They've been used at many, many other sites. So it feels like we know how to address these issues. It's really getting the lenders comfortable with accepting some of those issues and understanding that there's tried and true processes that have been able to manage them.
Well, maybe we'll switch from this kind of negative lender-focused aspect
good idea.
into brownfield success stories.
That's great.
Yeah. So, like, where are we winning the battle? Where are we seeing good outcomes?
Yeah, I mean, it's great that you're shifting to the benefits of brownfields, because that's a lot of what we've been doing at Canadian Brownfields Network, just sharing this, that there are so many benefits to brownfields. When the municipalities have community improvement plans, I'm not sure if you're familiar with those in Ontario, but there are ways to incentivize brownfield redevelopment. Those municipalities also do and evaluate their metrics and how much benefit they've been able to bring to their community in giving incentives to redevelop brownfield sites. And it's just phenomenal, the rate of return that the municipalities are getting for incentivizing brownfield redevelopment. So not only that uplift in tax, when you're redeveloping, you're getting a tax uplift, but you're also enhancing the community. You're making a community, you're getting all the advantages of infill and the social benefits to infill. So, I mean, the list of benefits goes on and on. So success stories, we're in Toronto. So if you look at most of Toronto's waterfront, it was a brownfield site. And you can see as you travel east from Redpath Sugar, the industrial property there, that we've now redeveloped all that industrial property into residential and institutional and commercial. So just, phenomenal new housing opportunities all along waterfront Toronto. Waterfront's edge, Toronto's waterfront, and moving all the way over to the Toronto Portlands. Again, another large brownfield site where the Don River is being revitalized to unlock land to redevelop that also for new communities. So many. I don't think you can walk in downtown Toronto a couple blocks without finding a success story on a brownfield redevelopment.
Are you familiar with how Europe has really made a lot of progression in this aspect, where there are tax incentives and all sorts of government
lending incentives,
government benefits for buying brownfields and cleaning them up and converting them. Do you think that's coming? Maybe just talk about the lessons learned.
And we can also see it in the U.S. as well, where there are so many grants and incentives available for brownfield redevelopment. It's enormous, and it is really invigorating a huge industry in brownfield redevelopment and conversion. It is not here, unfortunately, in Canada. We have some efforts at the municipal level to incentivize some of the brownfield redevelopment. We have a few programs at the federal level, but it's not to the degree at any other places in the world, unfortunately. And I hope it will. I think Canadian Brownfields Network is advocating for some more financial support and more incentives, more tools that are available for redevelopers, and also public landowners to shift this and really accelerate the brownfield redevelopment.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I know I was kind of sounding negative about brownfield redevelopment, and that was my point. If there's indemnification, or if there is ways to incent the developers to spend the time and the money, I mean, of course, all lenders across the country are 100% supportive. It's unfortunately, if you're relying exclusively on the developer, then it doesn't necessarily work. If there's major obstacles for that cleaning up, I don't know what you could greenification, or what's the word for turning a brownfield.
Restoration.
Restoration. There you go. Okay, good.
Revitalization.
I like that one. Where can they find you?
CanadianBrownfieldsNetwork.ca.
Okay, great. Are you looking for membership, looking for activists? How does that?
Always looking for members. We really need support across the country to take these actions forward. Streamlining brownfield approvals, getting more incentive tools to incentivize programs, to share that knowledge, to support not-for-profits, support municipalities. It takes a lot of people, and we need members to really ramp up what we're doing.
Aaron will be there to represent lenders.
Absolutely. Happy to.
Unfortunately, we are out of time here today, but I want to thank Fuller Lando for sponsoring our speaker video series, First National, for powering the podcast. The Real Estate Forums are hosting us here at the Land and Development Conference, but most importantly, I want to thank Meggen for joining us today and tackling a new topic for us. It's much appreciated.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Meggen.